Here's an interesting story. I'm curious if you have ever had any experience with Bitcoin. I have not. I've been watching this thing. I've talked on the radio and television a few times about how I think that Bitcoin is the new Dutch tulip bulb. It's the new South Sea issue. It's the new bubble. But the Mount Gox, which is actually an acronym for Magic the Gathering Online Exchange, which was originally an online exchange, sort of an online version of eBay, I suppose, or some variation of that, where people traded cards, trading card game, or trading game cards or whatever. I don't know all the details of it, but they started accepting Bitcoins, and then they became a Bitcoin exchange, and they became the largest, or one of the largest Bitcoin exchanges in the world, and they just went black yesterday. The website, they took down their Twitter feed, they just vanished with what might be $400 million worth of Bitcoins. Or, I shouldn't say worth. Bitcoins that people were either willing to pay for or had paid $400 million for. And there's a bunch of protesters out front of the now empty office buildings with signs like, "Where is our money?" 744,000 Bitcoins. It's about 6% of the 12.44 million Bitcoins in circulation. And nobody knows exactly what happened. There's a couple of articles about it in today's Financial Times and elsewhere all around the web you can easily find. And in fact, the headline in the Financial Times is Bitcoin Exchange Fears $400 million Theft. Now, what I think is particularly interesting about this is you've all heard the libertarian argument and the Rand Paul argument in favor of putting the U.S. back on the gold standard, which is that without the gold standard, we have what's called a fiat currency. In other words, a currency that is brought into being with nothing behind it. And I would argue that the U.S. dollar is not a fiat currency, at least not in the purest sense of the term, but the Bitcoin is. That Bitcoin does not have a sovereign nation behind it. There is nobody guaranteeing it with assets. Whereas the U.S. dollar is, you could say, well, what are the assets that back up the U.S. dollar? The $56 trillion worth of assets that the federal government owns. It's the full faith and credit of the United States. It's every federal building, it's all our parks, it's all our natural resources that are federally owned. And beyond that, it's the power and vitality and strength of a $15 trillion a year GDP economy. It's America that backs up the dollar. And just like the countries of Europe back up the euro. And in fact, I would submit to you that it would be stupid to go to a gold-based currency. It would be a big mistake. Because you want the amount of currency in circulation to be a reflection of the amount of economic activity that's happening, so that as economic activity contracts, the number of dollars contracts. As the economic activity expands, the number of dollars expands, so that basically the value of the dollar remains the same over time, or close to the same. You want a small amount of inflation every year for a whole variety of rather arcane reasons. The most obvious one being that if you get at zero or you start seeing deflation, then the economy starts to spiral down. It slides into deflation equals depression. Now, a lot of inflation can be very, very problematic. But this is the problem that Richard Nixon was facing in 1971, when we were arguably still on the gold standard. And that was that as the economy was growing, the amount of gold that we had to have in order to back the dollars, the number of dollars in circulation grew, and he couldn't get the gold. It's like, or as the value of gold, as the price of gold, rather, varied wildly. They used to fix it at $35 an ounce and simply make it illegal for Americans to hold gold. That's what FDR did. during the Great Depression in order to stabilize the dollar. And Nixon said, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to let gold float, and we're going to disconnect it from the dollar, which I think was the right thing to do. Say the dollar, is represented by the full faith and credit of the United States. But this whole Bitcoin thing shows you what a true fiat currency is. Bitcoin is a fiat currency. It's a currency that has been brought into being by virtue of a computer algorithm that does not have an issuing agency that stands behind it and says, we will make you whole if you are, if your currency collapses or if your currency is gone or whatever. Now, of course, the U.S. government, if you're robbed of $400 million, is not going to come in and say, okay, here's your $400 million back. But when your currency exists virtually on computers, and people can mine Bitcoins by just running their computer all day long, like, we used to participate in the early days in the SETI thing. Some of you may be old enough to remember that back in the late 80s, early 90s. Where a lot of us, I did this for like a year. When your computer's not running, you in the background, you just run this program where we're searching this massive database that NASA had of satellite, ears listening to outer space, looking for recurrent patterns in the noise that might indicate a distant intelligent civilization. And there was so much data available because we had so many of these satellites and satellite antenna arrays, and so little computing horsepower because we were just early on in the stage, in the early days of the computer revolution, that the government didn't have the budget or the ability to actually listen to all this data. And so people would dedicate computer processing power to it, and hundreds of thousands, millions of people were having their computers just crunching away in the background when they weren't using their computers, looking for intelligent life. It was like a really cool thing. But that's kind of a different thing than saying, I'm going to have my computer crunching away in the background, making me money. That very much sounds to me like the Dutch tulip bulb thing or the South Sea Island issue. These were, famous inflationary bubbles in Europe back in the 17th and 16th centuries, as I recall. And, where the value of something just went nuts because everybody thought they had to have it. Everybody thought they'd get rich on it. It was like, greed on steroids. So anyhow, this is my thoughts on Bitcoin. And if Rand Paul really, objects to, and wants us to go back to the gold standard, you got a real problem. Where are you going to get all that gold from? What's it going to do to the price of gold? What's it going to do to the value of the dollar? And what happens when we can't get more gold, but we have to expand our economy? What happens is that the value of the dollar starts going south. It actually would go up. The value would go up. The ability to get dollars would go down, and you'd throw the economy into a depression. 15 minutes past the